Tonight, tackling targeted threats. The RCMP forms a national team to investigate extortion schemes. Collaborating after trail of bullets and arson.
Have you ever been involved in an extortion?
Never ever.
And hear directly from a man accused of the crime.
We've been called for multiple victims.
Armed assault, a deadly stabbing attack at an apartment complex near Montreal. Also, the hero who tackled a suspect in the Super Bowl parade shooting.
I heard that get him. I remember I jumped.
Plus, new clues in the brutal killing of a Canadian couple in Dominica. And snatched, the alarming trend of dog napping.
She might come back and she might not.
The hope and heartbreak of rising pet theft.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. For weeks, CTV News has been telling you about extortion schemes targeting Canadian homes and businesses nationwide. Today, the Mounties revealed they've added reinforcements.
Leveraging existing tools, techniques, and resources that could help further advance these investigations.
The RCMP's new coordination team says it is supporting seamless information sharing at the national level between forces in BC, Alberta, and Ontario to look into all similarities and motivations behind threats reportedly linked to organized crime. A man charged with extortion just days ago and now out on bail spoke to CTV's Adrian Gabriel, who leads us off tonight.
Violent extortion attempts have triggered fear across the country. From Brampton, Ontario to Surrey, BC, South Asian businesses have reported extortion attempts that have resulted in gunmen shooting at their homes and businesses.
They received a phone call and threatening messages to send a large amount of money or they would be shot.
1 week ago, Peel Police announced they'd arrested 5 individuals, including this man, Arundeep Thind, who was charged with extortion. Thind, now out on bail, reached out to CTV News, saying he wanted to share his story and claim his innocence.
Have you ever been involved in an extortion?
Never ever.
Have you shot a gun at any homes or businesses?
Never ever.
You ever been involved in organized crime?
No.
Thind says he tried to help the owner of this Brampton restaurant, which was allegedly shot up. He called the number of the person who allegedly made the extortion attempt. He then claims the person he spoke with pressured him into going to a car dealership to request an extortion payment. He says he went, but simply handed a phone over to the owner. And during that phone call, a demand for money was allegedly made.
Yeah, I'm sitting there and police came and they arrested me.
Thind believes police are wrongfully painting him as a high-level gangster. After spending nearly 2 weeks in prison, he was released on bail.
Hoping that they're doing their job effectively.
The fact he's now out has one local city councillor fuming.
We definitely need to see some sort of a change in our bail system because it has become a running joke. That sense of public safety is starting to erode.
Many in the community are fearful. One business owner CTV News spoke with now wears a bulletproof vest every time he leaves his home.
Why was it important for you to speak with us today?
I have my family too. And my kids crying too. Our dad is not criminal. He's doing just work.
We reached out to Peel Regional Police. They declined to comment, saying the case is now before the courts. Adrian Gabriel, CTV News, Brampton, Ontario.
A condo tower in a suburb of Montreal where many seniors live is now a murder scene. And while the suspect is known to police, they're not saying whether if there's any link to the victims. CTV's Olivia O'Malley is in Vaudreuil-Dorion tonight. And Olivia, tell us what we know so far.
Omar, 2 women are dead and a third woman, aged 70, is in critical condition in hospital. Provincial police say they believe the victims were stabbed at this apartment building in Vaudreuil-Dorion, west of Montreal. The SQ says it was called to the high-rise on Émile Bouchard Street shortly before noon for an armed assault. According to police, a 44-year-old man has been arrested. He was also taken to hospital to treat his injuries. There is no fear for his life. People we spoke to say the man lived in the apartment building. Police are confirming the suspect is known to them, but they are not saying what the relationship is to the victims. All three women are adults.
In the three victims, two were found lifeless on scene. CPR was administered at first, but they were pronounced dead shortly afterwards.
Neighbors who live in the area told us they are shocked. They say it's a residential area with new housing developments.
A little bit freaked out because I thought it was a safe place.
Vaudreuil-Dorion Mayor Guy Pilon issued a statement. He says his thoughts are with the victims and their families of the tragedy, but also the people of this building. Meantime, the motive behind the stabbings is still under investigation. Omar?
Still a big question. All right, Olivia, thank you. Police in Kansas City are closer to a motive tonight in that fatal shooting towards the end of yesterday's Super Bowl parade. 2 juveniles are in custody. CTV's Heather Wright on what led up to those terrifying moments.
Kansas City police say it was likely an argument that led to yesterday's mass shooting, which killed 1 person and left nearly 24 injured.
I want to stress that preliminary investigative findings have shown there was no nexus to terrorism or homegrown violent extremism. This appeared to be a dispute between several people that ended in gunfire.
22 people were injured, at least half under the age of 16. 1 woman was killed, identified as Lisa Lopez Galvin, a local radio host and mother of 2.
Today in Kansas City was a day to celebrate. We woke up this morning excited, and the last thing we ever expected was to have a tragedy in our family.
More than 1 million people had gathered in downtown Kansas City yesterday to celebrate the Chiefs' Super Bowl victory when shots rang out on the west side of Union Station. Jacob Gooch, Emily Tavis, and their 13-year-old son were just feet from one of the shooters and were all hit.
He was shooting, it was kind of like he did like a circle kind of. You know, it wasn't like he just shot directly at somebody.
Fans and players ran for safety. Offensive guard Trey Smith joined about 20 others hiding in a closet.
Before I run in there's like a little kid in front of me, so I just grab him, just yank him, and just tell him, you're hopping in here with me, buddy. So I don't know how many people there were in the closet, maybe 20 plus.
The city's mayor has been asked about safety, saying there were 800 officers on duty who sprang into action.
There's a gun violence challenge in this community and many others, and there certainly is a gun violence challenge as it relates to major events. That, however, does not mean that Kansas City will stop having major events.
Police say they recovered several firearms from the scene, though they won't say how many or what kind they are. At least 7 people remain in hospital, 3 of them in critical condition. Omar.
All right, Heather, thank you. We are on the ground in Dominica tonight, the idyllic Caribbean island where the bodies of a Quebec entrepreneur and his partner were found in a burnt-out car back in December. 2 men have been charged, but now there are fears that the case could be buried. CTV's Geneviève Beauchemin on the investigation into the nightmare in paradise.
Yeah, we traveled to this road here on the mountainous island of Dominica, and this is really a road that is key to the case. This is the spot here where the car was found with the bodies of Daniel Langlois and Dominique Marchand. You can still see the trees, the charred trees, really evidence of the violence that unfolded here. We spoke to someone who was here that day who says that he heard gunshots, saw one of the suspects nearby, and heard the sounds of an explosion. Now, this is just down the road from Colibri Ridge. That's the luxury eco resort that was a labor of love for both Marchand and Langlois. They had worked on it for more than 2 decades. They were known here for their community involvement. They really helped here in the wake of the Hurricane Maria in 2017. We spoke to a close friend of the couple who says that she fears that the case could be buried here on the island of Dominica. She's hoping that the Canadian government can help somehow, but she has no assurances. 2 Americans were arrested in the aftermath of the murders. One of them, a wealthy man who owned an estate that was right next to Colibri Ridge, and they shared an access road. There had been a fight over that road for many, many years. We waited for a day here to speak to the police chief to ask him what he had to say to reassure people who were concerned about where this case would go. Here's what he had to say.
We believe that there is sufficient evidence to afford the charge and pursue the conviction of the suspects. We will not relent until we bring these perpetrators to justice.
The next step in this case is a preliminary inquiry scheduled for March 15th. Geneviève Beauchemin, W5 in Soufrière, Dominica.
A powerful nor'easter is dumping half a meter of snow with more on the way in parts of Atlantic Canada. This was a snow day for kids in St. John's, and in Cape Breton, schools were also closed today.
I thought, okay, hi Santa.
And this is what it looked like in Toronto, slammed with one of the biggest blasts of snow after an unusually mild winter. One of Canada's top airline executives apologized today for failing to accommodate people living with disabilities. It has become a recurring travel nightmare for many passengers looking to get around the country. CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver has the story.
About 1 in 7 Canadians has a disability, and for many, traveling is almost always a source of stress.
It is extremely frustrating. It's anxious on the way to the airport. You just wonder how it's going to go.
Sarah Morris-Probert has traveled all over the world as a Paralympic athlete and has had her wheelchair and equipment damaged numerous times. Last year on a trip to Cabo, she pulled herself up the stairs when she says staff refused to push a nearby ramp to her airplane's door.
Barrier-free access is through ramps is the easiest one, of which I will add in Cabo there was ramps, but they did not deploy them.
Stories like this have prompted a parliamentary committee to study accessibility in the airline industry. Today, the CEO of WestJet was up. In 2023, WestJet says there were 260,000 flights involving passengers using wheelchairs or other mobility devices. That resulted in 200 complaints and a total of 390 mobility devices repaired.
Sometimes things go wrong, and if they go wrong, I truly believe it's not a systematic failure, but it is an unfortunate coincidence that we then work through to understand what went wrong and what can we do to improve our service.
But Canada's accessibility officer, whose own wheelchair was left behind last year by Air Canada, says the problems are more than just a coincidence, but a symptom of a larger problem. In her first report out today, Stephanie Cadieux says more training, education, and regulations are needed to achieve a barrier-free Canada.
Accessibility is no longer optional. If it's not accessible, it's not done. And so the main message of the report is we're just getting started. We have a long way to go.
WestJet says it is introducing changes like ensuring all wheelchairs and mobility devices are wrapped to protect them from damage and finding new ways to ensure that a wheelchair, Omar, is always on the plane with the passenger.
All right, Annie, thank you. A BC tribunal has ruled Air Canada is liable for misinformation it provided to a grieving grandchild who ended up buying a full-price ticket to attend his grandmother's funeral. The bot said the man could apply for bereavement fares retroactively, but he says he later learned the airline does not allow that. Air Canada has been ordered to pay $650 in damages. Donald Trump was in a New York courtroom today trying to get the so-called hush money case against him thrown out, but the judge didn't go for it. Jury selection will go ahead next month.
There was no crime here at all. This is just a way of hurting me in the election because I'm leading by a lot.
The case that first made Trump a criminal defendant will now be the first to go to trial. Trump is accused of paying a porn star to cover up an affair ahead of the 2016 election, then falsely documenting it, prosecutors say, as a legal expense. Trump also took a parting shot at NATO on his way out of court today, while defense ministers met at the military alliance's headquarters in Brussels.
I was able to assure our allies that we are investing significantly more in defense. Canada has agreed to the 2% target. We're working towards that.
Canada's contribution currently falls below that. Today, Ottawa pledged more than $270 million for NATO's Canada-led battle group in Latvia on the border with Russia. The money is for air defense. And in a call with a member of Israel's war cabinet today, Prime Minister Trudeau once again expressed concerns about Israel's planned offensive in the densely populated city of Rafah in southern Gaza, where Israeli special forces raided the main hospital, forcing staff and patients to flee incoming fire. Israel alleges Hamas used it for cover. Here's CTV's Judy Trinh.
A frantic search for survivors after the largest hospital in southern Gaza is attacked by tanks and artillery fire. Other than the injured, thousands sheltering in Nasser Hospital and around it are forced to flee again. 2 patients were killed, said this medical volunteer. 1 was split in half by rocket fire. Israel claims the hospital is a Hamas hideout and sent in troops to hunt them down.
There may be bodies of our hostages in the Nasser hospital facility.
South of the hospital in Rafah, fears of a ground invasion are mounting. 1.5 million people are seeking refuge in the city that borders Egypt. It's also where the father of these Canadian siblings is sheltering after his home in northern Gaza was bombed.
They would force my father to walk in front of their tanks in case there's like a roadside bomb, I'm guessing. They would force my father to open doors for them, while they're standing behind him. In case there's an ambush, there's a booby trap, it would kill my father first.
Wessam Nofal and her parents are trying to get her brother and his children out of Rafah. Her parents have sued the federal government to get the family out and applied for emergency visas. They can't wait any longer.
We are going to Egypt, me and your dad. And it's either we go to Gaza to get actually your brother out of there, or we die with him.
Nofal says her parents are prepared to pay thousands of dollars in bribes to officials at the crossing. Meanwhile, Egypt is racing to finish building a massive new wall to keep Gazans out. The Prime Minister, in a joint statement with Australia and New Zealand, calls Israel's plans for a ground offensive catastrophic.
This morning, I spoke with President al-Sisi of Egypt. I've spoken with Minister Benny Gantz in the Israeli government.
Global Affairs says that since October 7th, more than 760 Canadians and permanent residents have crossed from Rafah into Egypt, including 30 people just last week. Omar.
All right, Judy, thank you. Coming up, dog owner despair.
You're stealing, a piece of someone's family.
A spate of thefts leaves Albertans on alert. Plus, Harry and Meghan in Whistler to continue the countdown to Invictus. A troubling trend is sparking fears among some pet owners in Alberta, dog theft. And now they're advocating for stiffer laws. Here's CTV's Alison Bamford.
She was kind of stolen right under my nose.
Ainsley Foss last saw her dog Dixie in November. The only sign of her in the area, an air tag once attached to her collar, found minutes from her farm in southern Alberta.
The reality is that she might come back and she might not.
Months of searching led Foss to other owners who also believe their dogs were stolen. 52 of them in the last 3 months, all with evidence to back up the claims, according to a new group of animal advocates. Many of the victims, large rural dogs.
I was quite naive. I really didn't think pet theft was a thing that I ever had to be worried about.
Alberta RCMP are investigating some of the reports, but don't have stats to confirm an uptick in stolen dogs. Mounties say there's no reason to believe illegal dog fighting or puppy mills are taking place. In the U.S., advocates say these crimes are linked to cash.
Organized crime, people stealing pets maybe to be resold on the black market.
French bulldog puppies, the #1 target, can fetch up to $10,000. Lady Gaga's Frenchies fell victim a few years ago, and just last month, this woman in LA flung herself onto the hood of a car to save her stolen bulldog.
People need to be held accountable when they are stealing someone's animal, because it is a lot different than stealing a couch or a TV. You're stealing, a piece of someone's family.
Under Canada's criminal code, stolen dogs are treated as theft under $5,000. But in the UK, a new pet abduction bill could send dog thieves to prison for up to 5 years. A change advocates would like to see here to reflect just how important a bond between a pet and a human can be. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
We have dramatic video tonight of a home invasion north of Toronto. 2 armed suspects broke in just after midnight on Valentine's Day. 2 people and their pets were inside. One of the victims pistol whipped and the other dragged up the stairs at gunpoint. The suspects stole some valuables and then drove off. Still ahead.
And liftoff.
NASA and SpaceX unite for a historic mission. Prince Harry was back on the slopes of Whistler today and raced down one of the world's fastest skeleton tracks. The Duke of Sussex nearly hit a speed of 100 kilometers an hour as his wife Meghan looked on. The The Royals are in BC to meet the Invictus Games athletes, training to compete this time next year on these very slopes. Canada's largest auto show is back, and electric cars are taking center stage.
Global automakers all over the world are focusing on electrification. Obviously, certain countries are instituting mandates.
From luxury cars to Tesla's Cybertruck to Barbie cars, the 51st edition of the Canadian International Auto Show kicks off tomorrow in Toronto, with more than 250,000 people expected to attend. This year, the Toyota Prius was named Car of the Year. An American lunar lander is on its way to the moon tonight for the first time since the Apollo era.
3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff.
A SpaceX rocket blasted off carrying the lander, and if all goes to plan, it will touch down near the lunar South Pole 1 week from today. After the break.
I've come across things like old bottles to coins to iPhones, iPads.
The cause behind this man's deep dives. Forget about diving for treasure. A man in Nova Scotia is taking a plunge, all for the environment. He's fishing for trash in lakes, oceans, and rivers, and what he's found may surprise you. CTV's Sarah Plowman has the details.
Each dive offers a window into Nova Scotia's rivers, lakes, and ocean. But besides beauty, Sean McMullen finds trash.
So I've come across things like old bottles to coins to iPhones, iPads, computers, toilets, whole doors.
Each one a mystery, like who tossed away this sawed-off shotgun or a torpedo bottle, likely from the 1800s.
And it's from one of the earliest bottle manufacturers of Halifax history. The name James Ruey is on it. And James Ruey is associated, he's the architect of the Blue Nose.
What began as a way to fight boredom during the pandemic is now one man's conservation mission.
What I love, my passion, is being in the water, cleaning it up, leaving it better than I found it, and finding really cool stuff while I'm doing it.
McMullen has tens of thousands of followers on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, where he shares what he finds and sometimes asks others, what did he find?
Things are really growing. There seems to be a lot of interest in what I'm doing.
Suzuki gave him a boat so he can travel longer distances for his dives. Conan O'Brien invited McMullen onto his podcast.
That was really cool recognition. I mean, I've been a fan of Conan since I was a teen.
Despite all the recognition, he's motivated by the cause, the cleanup.
To me, it's just more like the more people that I can get seeing what I do, hopefully it'll make a difference in their lives to want to clean up where they're at.
And so when the weather warms up, he'll dive in to see what trash or perhaps what treasure he can dig up. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Halifax.
And that's a snapshot of this Thursday. Heather is here tomorrow. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching, and good night.